Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is an amazing episode because Rich Davis boards the mothership, known as the writer of The Reign of Dracula. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Davis. Thank you so much for the Versus Stars podcast.
Hey, how's it going? Please, as that old adage goes, Mr. Davis is my dad. So,
No
call me
worries.
Rich.
I'll try to remember to call you Rich, but I guarantee I'm going to throw in some Mr. Davises in there.
It's fine.
Anyway, so I always start off with a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love of comics and who your earliest influences?
Wow. So the person who inspired my love of comics is without a doubt my mother. Because when I was a kid, I didn't like to read, believe it or not. Which is really shocking for people who know me to know that there was time I didn't like to read. But when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was play baseball and play video games. I had it in my head that I was going to play baseball for the Atlanta Braves. I even picked out the house I was going to buy for my mom. And I was very fortunate. I did get to play baseball into college, which was really cool. But when I was a kid, mom really wanted me to be a reader. My education was very important to her and to my dad as well. So mom being very clever, she decided that if I did well in school or I did all my chores at home or if I played well in a baseball game, on Saturday, she would take me over to Bob's Collector's Den, which was in Cookeville, Tennessee. It's like a town over from where I lived. And she would buy me comic books. I could buy whatever I wanted. And so I loved it. I mean, I started reading X-Men. I was reading a little bit of Batman, hated Wolverine, a lot of Spider-Man, Captain America, was reading those. And my little kid brain didn't realize that comic books were reading. And so by my mother being very clever and not giving up on me as a reader, I fell in love with comic books and I fell in love with reading. And now today I read every day. I mean, I'm still one of those people who actually reads a newspaper every morning because I enjoy the written word. And I would not be where I am today had my mother not tricked me into learning to read. So yes, absolutely. My biggest inspiration for falling in love in comics was my mom.
Comic books back in the day, I think they get more respect now as literature. But there's been studies I mentioned on the show before that there's more unique words in a comic book than most books for young adults out there right now. And and I think that's ingenious. I think people do forget how important to reading comic books could be.
Yeah, I remember I read an article a while back in the newspaper about they did a study and kids who read comic books performed 100 points higher on average on their SATs.
Nice.
That's a pretty big movement, and it's exactly what you just said. Comic books introduced me to a lot of words that I had never heard of and I didn't know how to pronounce. But by seeing them associated with the pictures, it helped me to learn those words. And the ones that I didn't know, it inspired me to pick up a dictionary because when I was a kid, there wasn't Google. Pick up a dictionary and look them up and see what they meant. So absolutely, comic books as an educational tool, I think they're perfectly made for it. And I am childhood literacy is a very important cause for me. At my store, Nirvana Comics, we have a lending library for kids. And a huge kids section. So we've always supported initiatives to get kids reading. Again, because I would not be where I am today if I hadn't learned to read, and I wouldn't have learned to read if I hadn't found comic books.
Well, you're now a successful comic book writer. Oh, and then I'm an author as well. You have you're on Simon & Schuster's publishers as well.
Isn't that wild?
That I was looking up your information. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I saw myself, like, my God, I have a Simon & Schuster author page. Holy hell! How did that happen?
Here's a question: how often do you suddenly bring that into conversations? Oh, we're talking about milk. And you're like, oh, you know what? When I was looking at my Simon & Schuster page, I was thirsty for some milk.
So this is going to shock a lot of people. I have an extremely high degree of confidence. I'm one of those guys, I think I can do anything. And I pursue it. And a lot of the times I'm able to do it. People often confuse that with arrogance. I am not an arrogant person at all. I hate talking about myself. I really, really do, which is you'll notice in my podcast interviews, when I'm asked a question, I always deflect it to someone else, my mom, the artist, whatever. So when I'm having conversations with people, I don't even mention that I write comic books generally, unless they know and they ask me questions about it. Now, when I'm on a podcast and I'm selling, myself, then yeah, I'll talk about stuff like that and be, but yeah, I really don't like talking about myself. I want the work to be more. I don't care if anybody remembers Rich Davis. I want them to remember Prometheus in Chains. I want them to remember Cult of Dracula. I want them to remember Reign of Dracula, which they won't get to remember it if we don't finish this Kickstarter. So help us, please. But yeah, I really don't care if I'm forgotten, but I want the work to live on.
Well, as you were mentioning, Reign of Dracula, that's the third book in the series, is that correct?
Yeah, it's the third and final volume in my original World of Dracula saga. That began with Cult of Dracula, which was a top 50 best-selling comic of 2021. Followed it up with Rise of Dracula in 2022. Then I took a break from Dracula in 2023. This year, I wrote Prometheus in Chains, which does tie into my World of Dracula universe. And then now in 2024, my first book is going to be Reign of Dracula, and I've got 3 more books scheduled to come out in 2024.
So, in conceiving your Dracula trilogy, how has the story diverged from the original conception of the story? How has writing it changed how you approached what was now going to be your third book?
So it has changed dramatically. I am, and this will surprise no one, I am not a person who sits down and blocks out beat by beat outlines. I have loose outlines of where I want the story to go. I know what my important milestone moments are, but my characters tell me where the story is going to go. I'm probably schizophrenic in some level because I have conversations with my characters about what's the story I'm telling, where do you want to go, where do I take this story from here. So a really good example of that is in Rise of Dracula issue 1. I introduced a trio of sisters called the Ruthven sisters, and initially they were just going to be one-off characters. I needed them to add a little comic relief to the book, and I needed them to get me to this blood rave, which is a direct homage to one of my favorite vampire movies of all time, Blade. And I had so much fun writing them, and their voices just wouldn't leave me alone. And so I ended up writing more and more and more and more. And then they became, pretty significant characters in Rise of Dracula. And now in Reign of Dracula, they're going to play a huge role. So, that was not in the plans, characters have died in my books that I didn't plan on dying. Like I had the idea to kill off, it's comic books and they're vampires. So you do the math if you think they're really dead. But to kill off Mina Murray in issue 3 of Rise of Dracula. And that was just a total surprise to me while I'm writing the scene. I look at my chapters as scenes. My background's in playwriting and screenwriting. So, I'll use terms like that quite regularly. But yeah, so just from my original conception, the keystone moments of the story have remained the same and consistent, but everything in between has gone through very dramatic divergence from where I initially saw the book going.
And the art for the book is absolutely tremendous. The artist is Les Linden Garner.
Yes.
I think I said the name totally correct.
You did. Yep.
Hey, points for me. So how did this partnership start?
I met Les on Cult of Dracula. He did a retailer exclusive cover, and I didn't know who Les was. Les didn't know who I was. But I opened up or FedEx showed up to my house with a package, and it was odd. It was a roll, and I was like, wow, I didn't order a poster. What is this? And so I opened it up, and there was this beautiful, beautiful cover art, painted and everything. And Les had accidentally sent it to me rather than the retailer who had paid him to do it. And I really wanted to keep that artwork. I really, really did. But Les got a hold of me and he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry I sent this to the wrong person," and he offered to pay for the postage. And I said, "It's no big deal." And I shipped it to the retailer. And from there on, Les and I, we got to talking, and Les and I vibed. We can talk to each other. We're good friends. We became very good friends very quickly, and I really love working with Les because he's one of the few people that I've met that shares my drive and work ethic.
Mm.
And so Les and I, we're doing a lot of great things together now. And we've got some great things cooking for in the near future that we're going to do together. And I love working with Les. I've had him involved literally with every book that I've done. He did all of the A and B covers for Prometheus and Chains. We called him in on the last issue of Prometheus and Chains to do inks on the final issue because Jordan Dorenzo, he was the print schedule got moved up by 2 weeks, and he couldn't by himself couldn't meet that deadline, and that's not his fault at all. The publisher just moved the deadline up, and so we pulled Les in to do inks on that. He did some covers for Rise of Dracula and of course Cult of Dracula. So yeah, we just became really fast friends.
So knowing that you have an artist of his caliber on the book, what does that allow you to do? Has the story changed at all to be adapted towards his style?
That allows me to do anything in the world because I know whatever craziness I come up with, I know Les can do it. And Les, what a lot of people don't understand, because you look at Les, he looks like this, big scary biker dude. He's like 6'4", shaved head, beard, just total biker dude. And you would not expect for him to have the depth of artistic knowledge that he does. Like he and I often we sit down and we talk about not only comic artists but artists, and we talk about their different styles. And I love art. I just love art. And so when I call him up and say, "Hey, I want to cover, kind of in the style of, Francis Bacon," he can do it. He'll just pop it right out because he knows what I'm talking about. So I think that's probably the most important thing that a creative team can have is that strong relationship between writer and artist. I've been very fortunate with that. I have that relationship with Les. I have that relationship with Jordan Dorenzo on Prometheus and Chains. And it makes things a whole lot easier when the artist just gets you and you get the artist. So I can see in my head the way Les is going to structure a page. So that will oftentimes allow me to focus less on the panel layout and more on the detail. Or sometimes I'll focus less on the detail so that I can focus more on the character, the dialogue. Art is what draws a reader into a comic book. The story is what makes them stay. So Les's abilities as an artist and our relationship, the way that we work, it allows me a lot of freedom to create just about anything that I want. And if I go too far, Les knows me and loves me well enough to say, "Richard, come on, back off, this is stupid."
Well, I mean, it's an interesting concept. The Dracula you're referring to in the story is actually Lilith,
Yes.
who's the mother of monsters. Biblical Lilith, I'm assuming, is when we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't exclusively draw from the Judeo-Christian version of Lilith. I pull heavily from the Islamic myth of her as well. Obviously, we do have the Judeo-Christian as well, but I think it's very important. My world of Dracula is a naturally multicultural story. It was very important to me to not simply present a Western view of vampires. I wanted vampires don't exclusively belong to the West. Every culture has a vampire myth. Every culture has a vampire myth. And So I didn't want to tell another story in Victorian London about a pasty white dude from Eastern Europe coming in and buying up all the property. That story's been done so many times and so well. Nobody needs my version of that story. Nobody needs another version of that story, period. It's already been done and done well. Leave it alone and do something different. So I wanted to do something different. And so I started researching vampire myths from all over the world. And I discovered that our Western culture is one of the very few in human history that has male vampires. In most cultures, vampires are female. It dates back to the myth of the succubus. Vampires steal your soul. They, steal your essence, nocturnal ejaculation, all that stuff. So when I discovered that, a light bulb went off. And I was like, well, what if all of these creepy, scary women in children's stories and nursery rhymes and all that, what if they were all Dracula? La Llorona, the Cherokee deer woman, Kali. Of course, Kali's a goddess, not a children's story. I want to make sure I'm not disrespecting anyone. But what if all those figures were Dracula, interpreted differently by the cultures who observed her? And it really did open up a huge storytelling opportunity, because there was literally nowhere I couldn't go with my Dracula story. So Dracula became more of a title than a name. Dracula is not one character. Dracula is dozens or hundreds of characters throughout a common bloodline that traces its origins all the way back to Lilith and the Garden of Eden, where the angel Israfil cursed her to, in order to survive, she would have to consume 1,000 of her children every day just to survive. So that sounds a hell of a lot like a vampire to me. And so, boom, from there, it really just let a train go, and it's, speeding down the tracks. We've introduced a lot of really cool vampires and referenced a lot of vampire mythologies throughout the three books. In Reign of Dracula, you're going to see a lot of that. Like, we've been started teasing it in Cult. We brought it kind of to the forefront. We started seeing some of the Dracula from the past in Rise of Dracula, and in Reign of Dracula. They're front and center. We're going to answer a lot of the questions that you've had from the previous two books. We're going to explain that mythological link in depth in Reign of Dracula. So there is a huge payoff. If you've read Cult of Dracula and you've read Rise of Dracula, you're going to get a huge payoff. If you haven't read those books, you can still read Reign of Dracula and get a satisfying beginning, middle, and an end. But I do hope people will go and read Cult and Rise, and I hope they'll read Prometheus in Chains as well, because it ties into my world of Dracula. I introduced Victor Frankenstein in issue 3 of Rise of Dracula, and he was another character that wouldn't leave me alone. He had a story to tell. So I created the book Prometheus in Chains, play on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In the final issue, we introduced the link to the world of Dracula. And it also explains a lot about the mythology that we've been teasing in the previous two books. So I'm really trying my best to weave a shared horror universe, where we can have all of these figures and all of these stories they don't necessarily have to meet, but they run parallel, or every now and then they'll cross over. I'm very much inspired by Stephen King and his Dark Tower series, how everything ties into the Dark Tower. Everything I write somehow ties into my world of Dracula.
Well, I think two interesting characters that are in the comic book are the daughters of Lilith, Lucy and Mina.
Yes.
I think it's very interesting that they are traveling to heaven and hell in order to save the universe. Now, what's kind of interesting about that is that by introducing heaven by having heaven as part of the story, the question then becomes, where is God in all this? If Lilith is conquering Earth and demons are reigning on Earth, and so are the vampires, where are God and his angels in all this
then? They're present.
They're cool with it?
They're present. So I can't go too much in detail without spoiling. Um, but Neil deGrasse Tyson once had was giving, I don't know if it's a TED talk or whatever, it was an interview, and he was talking about God, and he said, and this trigger warning for some people out there, this is going to be rough, but it has a point. He said, somewhere on this planet right now, at this very moment, a child is being raped. That is a fact. That is happening somewhere on this planet. So one of three things has to be true. Either God knows about it and can't stop it, or God, in which case he is not all powerful. He doesn't know about it, so he doesn't stop it. Therefore, he is not all knowing, or he knows about it and just doesn't want to stop it. Therefore, he is not all good. One of those three things has to be true. It has to be true. So that gave me the idea for when Mina is working her way through the choruses of heaven while Lucy is exploring the circles of hell. It's Inferno and Paradiso, a reference to those. And so when Mina meets God, she has a similar confrontation. She asks exactly the question that you just asked. Where are you in all of this? And so those questions will be answered in the book. Now, when you're seeing the battle on Earth, you are seeing angels and demons and Nephilim, and you're seeing monsters and creatures from many cultures, because this is Armageddon. When the world ends, it's not just going to end on the Western Hemisphere. It's going to end all over the world. Whatever, every culture has an apocalypse story. So it would be unfair of me if I have a multicultural Dracula lineage. It would be very unfair to me if I focused on one culture's doomsday myth. So the easiest answer to that question is they are present.
Now, Lucy and Mina are trying to save the universe. Their mother is Lilith, Dracula, mother of monsters. Where are they getting the morality from? If Lilith's the mother, is there a father? But the key question is, where do you get your morality from when your mother's Lilith?
Yeah. So Mina and Lucy were both raised in the cult of Dracula, essentially. Mina was absconded in as a small child, and she thought she was being stolen away for her protection. We learn in Cult of Dracula that wasn't necessarily true, and Lucy was left behind. And Lucy was raised in the cult. Mina was raised by an adopted family, essentially. You'll find out that one of the people who raised her was actually Lucifer. So I play with the idea that Lucifer isn't necessarily the evil monster. We go back to him in like the book of Job in the Judaic text, where he is the advocate. He is the adversary. He serves a necessary part in God's plan. So he has that similar role in raising Mina. And really what creates their morality is by seeing the evil in the world. It's not necessarily something that their parents instilled in them, but when they see what's going on in the world, when they see humans driving 99.9% of every living thing that's ever walked the face of the earth into extinction, when they see the pollution, when they see poverty, when they see wars and murders and rapes, when they see all of these things, and when they become Dracula at different times in the story, each one of them has been Dracula, Mina and Lucy. And with that gives them the ability to see things with a broader context. They see more than the average human does. And it's that experience and that observation that gives them their morality. And their moralities are different but they are also they're parallel to one another. You'll find also in this book, the story, a lot of yin and yang balance. And we play with the concepts of what is good, what is evil, and it's not a black and white world. The world we live in is very gray, and the world I write is very, very, very gray. So yeah, that's where the morality comes from.
Well, I heard another story about your book because, like I said, it's been very popular, selling extremely well. And the story that I heard is that the popularity has actually gotten the attention of Tony Todd. If people don't know who Tony Todd is, we're not talking about just a actor. This is a very famous actor, from Candyman, from a bunch of stuff. So is that a true story that I'm hearing? Is that a fake story? What's going on with that?
That is a very true story. Tony and I happen to be friends. I've known him for many years. Tony actually saw Cult of Dracula when it was in its infancy as a stage play. We produced it in 2013 in Wilmington, North Carolina. It ran for a month of sold out shows. It was nominated for several North Carolina Theater Awards. It won a few. And Tony happened to have been in town. I think he was filming something. Wilmington's got a great film community, Screen Gem Studios, all that. And he had a night off and decided he wanted to go to the theater, and this caught his attention. So he came out and he watched. He also sang karaoke with us after, which I've got videos that he'll kill me if I release. So he took an interest in it. He really liked the story, and Tony was very encouraging and supportive. And he suggested, that I make this into a film, and he wanted to be involved in that film. So from the stage to the comic book adaptation, the screenplay, then the comic book, I added a character called Agent Malcolm Brom, with the idea that Tony would play that character in the movie. Things happened in life. My wife Amber became very ill. She passed away in 2020. So at the time, I couldn't make a film. I knew I couldn't devote the time and the resources to making an independent film. But Amber didn't want me to let it go. And she said, well, why don't you turn it into a comic book? And it clicked. I said, writing a comic book is very similar to writing a screenplay. A comic script has more in common with a screenplay than it does a prose novel. I mean, they require a completely different skill set. And so I reached out to some friends that I happen to know, Georges Genty, Tom Lyle, people who are in the industry, and I got their advice. And I reached out to other people in the industry that I didn't know, and they were very kind to give me their time and their advice. And so yeah, it became a comic book. And then when the property was optioned, and now it is actually Cult of Dracula is in active development with BR Films to be a movie. Tony's interest has stayed strong, and we have him. We have a letter of interest from him signed, so he'll be in the film when it gets made. And Tony and I have just become really good friends. I've got some pretty fun stories with him, and it's pretty damn cool. Tony's he's an amazing guy. He's big and he's scary, and he plays some awesome horror characters, but he's so nice. And he's so kind and caring in person. He's a good human being.
Now, one of the stories I did, once again, I've done some research and I've heard some stories. One of the stories I've heard has to do with him and a drinking story. Do you have time to share that?
There's a couple. One of the most fun I really like, Jerry Carita, who is he was my television producer when I was doing Swap Shop on Netflix. And Jerry is also the founder of Thorny Comics, who's putting out Reign of Dracula.
In front of the show.
Yep. Yeah, great guy. Love Jerry to death. We've become very good friends. Hell, we go to Broadway shows together. Tony happened to be on the East Coast. He was doing a stage play at DeSalle University. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, Rich, I'm here for the month. I'm doing this show. Do you want to come up and see it?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" So we drove up to Pennsylvania, to DeSalle University, Jerry and I, and we watched this amazing show. And Tony was so powerful on it. So you think he's good in a movie? Good God, let him have a stage all to himself. It's beautiful. And so we went out afterwards, went out drinking this little bar. God, I even forgot the name of the town. Anyway, we got in this bar. It's like underground. It's like in this building. It's like in the basement or the sub basement of this building, and we're having fun. We're alcoholic drinks were imbibed by all, and when we're leaving, we're leaving, and we pass by in the corner. There is this blue rainbow weird painted horse statue. And, and Tony looks at it and he said, "I'm gonna ride that horse." And he went over and he rode the horse. Here's giant Tony Todd riding this amazing, funky blue horse statue, and I've got pictures to prove
it. so that's is that for blackmail purposes.
Maybe if Tony ever says, Rich, I don't really want to do it, I'm like, "Tony, I'll put that picture out." Awesome. I would never do that.
so Reign of Dracula, the Kickstarter, because it's ran as a Kickstarter. What are the dates that it's running for?
We have, as of this recording, we have 7 days. So I think that puts us on the 29th. It ends at 6 p.m. on the 29th, which will be Wednesday from here. So yeah, it's we're doing well. Not as well as I had hoped. This is my first experience with Kickstarter, so I really don't know if we're doing normal or great or if we suck. But I was hoping we'd be at our goal now and working on some stretch goals. We're about I guess we're at $4,000 out of 5 right now. So what is that, 80% funded, somewhere around there. And I think we're going to get there, but we definitely need some help. We need people out there who are listening to this to back it. I really do want to finish the story, and I can't do it without Kickstarter. I funded Cult and Rise of Dracula and Prometheus and Jane's completely out of pocket. And each one of them cost me, the cheapest one cost me $19,000. The most expensive cost me 26. That's a big chunk of change. So going to Kickstarter, that's allowing me to crowdfund in advance the money that I'll need to pay the artist and the colorist and the letterer and the cover artists. So Kickstarter's been a very exciting opportunity for that. We've got some amazing reward tiers. One of the things that's probably kept us from reaching our goal faster is I insisted that our buy-ins be very low. Jerry had a hard time convincing me to do a Kickstarter. He kind of had to twist my arm a little bit, and I said 2 things. I want it to be accessible, affordable, and I want them to have a reason to back this book on Kickstarter rather than waiting for it to come out in comic book stores next year, because the book will be released in 6 full color issues in comic book stores everywhere in 2024. But our Kickstarter backers get jumbo size 48-page issues with bonus content, and they're in a black and white ink wash with all original covers, and those will never be reproduced in any format anywhere for any reason. The only way to get them is by backing them on Kickstarter. So we've got some great cover art from Brian Silverbacks. He's a Ringo Award nominated cover artist. Jordan Dorenzo did a cover. Sean Koss did a cover. Tyler J. Haddix did some work on TMNT The Last Ronin. He did a great cover for us. Bella Racklin has a gorgeous, gorgeous cover, and each one of the covers is a unique style. I wanted to give people, a little something for everybody. So yeah, the Kickstarter, there's reasons to do it. There's also a catch up tier where you can get either digitally or physically. You can get copies of both Cult and Rise of Dracula, and Reign of Dracula. So you'll have the whole series if you want it. There's a digital only tier if you want to just get digital versions of all three books. There's a lot of different mix and match. We do have some amazing retailer tiers out there. So, we wanted retailers to be able to get these. What's important for retailers is they get a 65% discount off the MSRP. I am a retailer. I own a comic book store. And I understand one of the reasons why retailers don't back Kickstarters more often is because there's no meat on the bone. There's no profit margin. When the retailer has to pay 10, 15, 20 bucks for the unit, then that means they have to sell it for 30, 45 or $60 because you want to triple your investment. In an ideal world, in the world of retail comics, unfortunately, oftentimes you can barely double your money. The retail industry is kind of messed up with the way comics go. Retailers don't get cheap enough books, and writers, artists don't get paid anywhere near enough. And the distributors, they kind of take all the money. They're the ones who make the money off of it. So for retailers, if you back our Kickstarter, then you're getting a 65% discount off MSRP. You can take that, you can sell, you buy 20 copies and you can sell it to your customer, and you can make more money by selling Reign of Dracula in your store than you can anything from Marvel. Because Marvel, you're going to get a 50% discount. That's it. And there's not a lot of meat on the bone. If you buy a Marvel book and it doesn't sell, you've got to at least sell half your copies just to break even. Right. And a lot of books don't sell that many copies. So we're giving you a 65% discount, which gets you into kind of, it's above Keystone. It gets you in the butter zone of, of your profit potential. So retailers out there really need to be backing this book. If you've got horror fans in your stores, if you've got Cult of Dracula fans, and I know you do, because Cult of Dracula sold well over 175,000 units. So I know if you're a retailer listening out there, you carried at least one copy of my book, because there's only 3,500 or so retailers in the country. So yeah, sell that many copies. Everybody pretty much had one. So you've got a fan base, you can make money here. So as a retailer, get your ass over there and back this project. It's a no-brainer. It really is. And I speak from experience. I've been where the retailers are. I've been on that side of the counter. I mean, hell, I did it so well, I was on a Netflix show about it. So, listen to me when I tell you, make money off of my name, make money off of what I've written, because your profit potential with the big two is tight. So get those things that you can score a big margin on.
So my listeners, please back it now. You have, from the date of this release, you're going to have about 6 days to back it. So go ahead and do so. Mr. Davis, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.